Thank you so much, Gabrielle. And Lisa and I are thrilled to be here. So I think we've covered it in terms of what Revved Up Kids is doing in the state of Georgia. We have trainings that are in person, largely derailed by COVID, but we also have trainings that are delivered virtually, and we just released video trainings for children and teens as well. So please take advantage of our website. I am so elated to be able to sit here with Lisamarie today and have her share her story with you. And the specific purpose in this is to really give you a personal look at the gateway of childhood trauma as it relates to sex trafficking. So I'm going to ask Lisa a few questions. I hope that we'll be leaving some time at the end for some questions from the audience. But let me just start with this, Lisa, and this is emotional. I want you all to know that this is an emotional moment. This is the first time that Lisa is really sharing with an audience like this, and so please bear with us as we go through this. I appreciate that relaxation exercise that you did out of the gate, Gabrielle. So you escaped your trafficker 5 years ago, and you've been just rebuilding your life ever since. Just tell us how you're doing.
Absolutely. Okay, so Gabrielle, thank you for the exercise because I really needed that as well. The healing process for me has been long and extremely hard. So when I first escaped being trafficked, I went through what you would call like a serious bout of depression. I didn't want to talk about anything that I went through. And I struggled like to re-enter into society and to kind of get back on my feet. So at this time, I ended up losing custody of my son. And it is a battle that I'm still fighting today, actually. And the damage from having both of my children separated has been one of the hardest battles to fight. As you can imagine, all of that stuff just took a huge toll on me. So the writing played the pivotal role in my healing. Being able to journal all of that stuff, it gave me a different perspective on my life. And I guess I got the chance to like regain my power, like take my power back. And I did this by using hindsight, and it provoked corrective action in me. So I guess that was the moment, you know, one of those like light bulb moments for me that I knew, okay, I have to ask myself some very difficult questions, and I'm probably about to have to face some really difficult answers too. And I learned to stop blaming myself first. So that was a hard thing to learn. And it wasn't until recently that I feel like I accepted the truth. And the truth is that my circumstances as an adult were a direct result of my experiences as a child, of the things that I went through. So in recognizing that, I've first been able to understand my abuse. You know, it's hard to understand, it was hard to wrap my head around, but I was able to reconcile with it too, so that I could start to move forward. And then in that, I had to acknowledge, you know, that it was a lot of other people that should hold the responsibility for those things. And for a long time, I thought it was me that should, you know. I'm sorry.
Lots of Kleenex. We have lots of Kleenex. Here's more Kleenex.
Thank you.
It's okay.
So this is probably a brighter moment. My kids, like, my kids are 9 and 7, and they've been my motivation through every step, every part. And after going through that situation, I first had to rebuild my thought process, right? So I had to learn how to think differently. And the first thing I realized was, in going through that, my daughter had seen like a lot of stuff. My daughter had saw the things that I went through. She had been taking all that stuff in, you know, and I knew that I had to teach her all of the stuff that I didn't get a chance to learn, the things that I didn't know on my own. And then after, you know, just trying so hard to figure things out for a while, something became a little bit more clear to me. And it was that both of my kids needed to know that I love them unconditionally, you know. They needed to know that they never had to question that, you know. And I wanted to make sure that they got it, you know, it was instilled in them, so that when they grew up, they wouldn't be able to be led astray by anybody else. So I want to be that safe space for them, the place that they can always come to, the person they can always come to. And a lot of that was from my own experience, you know, and knowing what I needed. So, and all of that emotional, you know, pullover stuff, I made an initial transformation. And the first one was from like victim to survivor. And I didn't realize I was a survivor at first until I realized that I wasn't victimizing myself anymore. And that transition for me gave me a different mindset. So in the survivor mindset, instead of, you know, feeling sorry for myself every day, I was able to go to work, I was able to go to school, I was able to take care of my daughter. But then another like shift happened. And I tell everybody it was like a mental evolution for me, because in that sense, I went from surviving to thriving. And that point has been amazing for me, because I have found inspiration, I found purpose through that. And I think honestly that it's been the most powerful transition out of all of them.
Wow. I just want to give people a chance to take that in for a moment, because that's just kind of a little glimpse of the story that you are living. And again, just so glad that you're willing to share this with us today. My next question is about the prosecution of your trafficker. I thought this was interesting when you and I were speaking a few weeks ago, that you said the district attorney told you that your case was textbook when they were prosecuting your trafficker.
Yes.
What do you suppose they meant by that?
Well, let me start by saying that my life probably has been a continuing domino effect, if you will. And I'll tell you how. So I've been through a fair amount of ACEs, like a lot of them. And my mother actually had 4 children. So we are now 27, 23, 22, and 21. And I'm the oldest. So my mother lost custody of all of us before we were 2 years old. And we ended up, my grandmother and my great aunts took guardianship of us, and they gave us stability. We were happy, you know, we were in good homes, but I still got to visit my mom. And that's where the initial trauma happened. So while my mother went to the store one day, she was unaware of this whole thing, but her boyfriend came in and he molested me first and raped me shortly after that. And he told me that I was going to be dead if I told anybody. And for me, I was 8. So I believed him, you know. I wasn't, gonna, try it and see. So I didn't say anything. And I kept my mouth closed on that for 4 years.
Wow.
And now, just looking back on everything, like, I know that it was generational sexual abuse in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I know that my mother went through it. I know other people in my family went through it. And for this reason, nobody really openly discussed sex. It wasn't a big topic. You know, it was kind of like a closed topic, actually. Because and I just believe that they felt like if they didn't talk about it, then it wasn't a reality. We wouldn't maybe want to do it, you know. They could have had their reasons, you know, just to protect me. But those are the things that contributed to me not disclosing the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, jumping forward a little bit, a few years later, my mother, she cleaned up, she fought for custody. And at that point, we were all like given a choice. So 2 of my brothers that were in stable homes, they chose to stay where they were. And this is probably, I think, like, interesting to everyone that probably would be listening, because you're going to see a clear comparison, you know, here. At 11 years old, I made the biggest choice of my life. And that choice was, I'm going to go live with my mom. She deserves a chance to be a mom. She hasn't had that opportunity. And I felt like me and my brother were her chance.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. And we were happy, actually. Like, for a few years, everything was stable. We were good. But at the time, or by the time I was 15, my mother had relapsed again. And although the first part was interesting, this is probably the most interesting part of my story for everybody, because, and I'll stop right here for a moment. At the time of my mother's relapse, I was an honor roll student. I was actually a straight A student.
Wow.
And the following year, I had dropped out of school. By 17, I was pregnant with my daughter. And my youngest brother, the one that lived with us as well, he ended up in a gang. He's been incarcerated multiple times over the last 5 years at least. And he's only 21. Mm-hmm. The 2 brothers that chose to stay in these stable environments, you know, I didn't blame them. They, you know, my aunt was, she was in the Army for 23 years.
Wow.
You know, so it was a great environment, but they have totally different lives. One of my brothers is studying to be a veterinarian. The other one is a pilot in the Air Force, and they're 22 and 23.
Wow.
Right? So just looking at all of that, it became clear that, first of all, myself and my siblings had our futures kind of determined by a few different things. The adults that were in our lives at the time, our circumstances, our environments. And I'm still coming to terms with all of that and how I can move forward with my children so that they can live lives that are similar to my brothers, you know, that bring out the best in them, basically.
Yeah.
So, circling back to me, I am 18 with a newborn. I have a baby. And at this point, I think I was doing like everything I could just to like survive, to make it. And I was kind of like surrounded by people that were products of my environment. So sex addicts or sex workers, drug addicts, you know, those type of people. And I was living with this girl who was my friend, actually. And through her, I met this guy. And this guy, although he was sweet at the time, ends up being a trafficker. Mm. So to answer your question on what the DA's office meant by textbook, it basically describes like the way he was able to manipulate me into getting what he wanted, He took months of like grooming me, if you will. And what I mean by that is he spent months like building this emotional bond with me. He wanted to make me feel like he cared about me, about my daughter, that he genuinely cared. And I actually believed him, you know, for a while. So, you know, that kind of always made me feel stupid, you know.
No.
But I had to learn to stop that. You know, I had to learn that he made those choices to do that, to do that to me. Mm-hmm. And this transitioned quickly into physical abuse. So during this abuse, he was breaking me down. He was driving me into this constant state of panic all the time. And I learned later that he had done this to women across the country. Like, he was really good at it. Wow. Right? It was crazy. And when he trafficked me, he like sort of took me into this really dark place psychologically. And it was through my daughter that I think I stopped myself from committing suicide. Mm-hmm. Like, when I felt like, okay, I cannot take this anymore. Mm-hmm. She was the light for me. And with her being that light, I was able to lean into my faith really, really hard. I started talking to God a lot. That was really big for me at one point, and I kind of lost it during that time that these things were happening. So I prayed, and when I finally sat down and I received the message that I feel like God was giving me, it was that my daughter's future depended solely on me. It depended on me getting out of that situation. It depended on me escaping. And at that point, I didn't have a choice. If I didn't leave, I wasn't going to break any cycles. And that it's possible that this would have repeated itself again. So looking back on everything that happened, I think I can honestly say that, like, I never blamed my mother. Even as a kid, I viewed her addiction as a sickness. I knew that something was wrong, I knew that it could be fixed. But as an adult now, I actually know that her addiction was a direct result of her own childhood sexual abuse. So I think I spoke earlier about CSA being generational in my family. And with that, I always believe that my mother tried to do her best. I really do. And today, I'm happy to report to you that she's happy, she's stable, and she's a wonderful grandmother to my children. Like, honestly, I'm trying not to cry right now just thinking about it.
Yeah, we need lots more Kleenex.
Right. So, we have a great relationship, like a great relationship. And it was through, I feel like, understanding all of these patterns, understanding the things that happened to us and how it affected us, what roads, we traveled due to these things, that we were both open to mending that relationship that was meant to be broken in the first place. And for that, I can only say that I just feel truly blessed.
Wow. I would love to grab more Kleenex, but I'm not sure where it is, so I can't right now. I'm gonna ask somebody here in the studio to see if they can grab some Kleenex for us. But so I have one more part of our fireside chat, and I'm gonna ask 2 more questions. But these are predicated on the fact that the state of Georgia is really doing good work, really trying to move forward in terms of trauma and childhood trauma. The state of Georgia is moving to a trauma-informed approach, helping people learn more about childhood trauma and how it impacts, all the way to adulthood, right?
Right.
And then also helping people become more trauma sensitive.
Right.
So my first question for you is, how does your childhood trauma inform your parenting?
Okay. Well, I'm a mama bear when it comes to my kids. Like, I am like all over, anytime, anything happens, I'm like, oh my God, here I come. I want to protect them all the time with like every fiber of my being. And thank you for the Kleenex.
More Kleenex.
Thank you. So, after I wipe my face here, if I can just get a show of hands of maybe any parents that feel that way, so I know that I'm not alone. Alli.
Can you raise your hands in the chat? There's some hands coming up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So with saying that, I guess I refuse to let my kids be shaped by the childhood trauma that happened to me. I can't do it. And every day I'm still a work in progress, I feel like. In reality, I'm a work in progress. And everybody, just looking back on the way that I parent, everybody tells me that I'm overprotective. Like, you're overprotective. And I'll give you an example. So my daughter is 9. She's 9 and she's in the 3rd grade. She's never been to a public school, ever. Like, she went to preschool, and after that I just snatched her up and I was like, nope, you're gonna stay home with me. Because I was scared. I didn't just want to push her out there, because there was so much stuff that happened, so much stuff that I was exposed to that nobody was able to protect me from. So I was like, oh no, I'm gonna do this. And first of all, I recognize that I'm gonna have to, clip her wings a little bit, eventually. But I think that even now, I'm contemplating homeschooling for a few more years, just because it makes me feel better, you know? And again, I can give you 1,000 reasons why, but the truth is that I love her, and I just want to protect her for as long as I can. You know, so looking back on my life as a child, I really wish that the adults in my life had access, even to resources like Revved Up Kids provides. Like, I feel like if they would have been more open to having those conversations, if they would have been a little bit more comfortable talking about it, that it could have changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Wow.
I could have went in an entirely different direction. And they could have been able to maybe protect me a little bit better. I know they tried, but information could have helped. And it even could have changed my mother's life and sent her down an entirely different path.
Yeah. Wow. All right, last question.
Okay.
Given your circumstances and given the path that you were handed from, frankly, the time you were a young child, what do you think would be opportunities for the state of Georgia as they're forming policy, as they're making decisions about supporting? What would you have wished to have had? And what could the state do better in terms of teenagers and children who are facing similar circumstances to those that you faced?
Absolutely. So from my point of view, and I guess in terms of support, I feel like, just personal opinion, I was trapped in this void with no access to resources at all. So when I dropped out of school, I wasn't in school, and that's why I had no access to these resources. And there was no connection to programs. So I feel like that while the state is looking into these important programs, that they recognize a lot of teens are not in school. A lot of teens don't have access to critical information outside of the school. So in terms of the state's response to people like me, I just see it as an opportunity to do better. I mean, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was 17, I was homeless, and if I had been in school, then maybe resources could have been available, that might have been the case, but the reality for me was, my reality was I wasn't in school.
Right.
So that's where I see another opportunity, because thinking back to that time, I mean, things for me were not that good. I was on pregnancy Medicaid, I was grateful for that, and I was flat broke, and that is no exaggeration. So I ended up going to the local health department. They put me into this centering group, that's what they called it, and it was basically a group that young moms got into, and they taught us about, baby blues, postpartum depression, taking care of your baby, all kind of good stuff. And that program was awesome. I mean, no shade, but there is a place that group fell short. And that place was, there was a lot of information that should have been included. There was no talk of homelessness. There was no talk of food insecurity, relationship abuse, trafficking, so looking back, I believe that I couldn't have been the only girl in the room that needed that information. Right. It's, impossible. So I'm thinking that, and this is just a suggestion, when we're looking for ways to serve our citizens, ways to better our children, then we could use that as an opportunity for these teens that are experiencing this trauma, that aren't in school or that are homeschooled, like my daughter, to have access to the resources, to put it where they can get to it. Here's a question, just throwing this out there. Why couldn't maybe some of the training be embedded into DPH, the Department of Public Health? Like the centering programs like I was in, we could take some of those programs and training and put it there. Put it where those girls are, maybe in the WIC program, stuff like that, so that they can see it. And as long as they can see it, then they know that they have access to it, and that's all that they need to know to make a difference. Another place that these support systems could even work would be maybe the child's annual physical exam with their physician, you know, around like 5th or 6th grade, when kids are learning about themselves, you know, when they're open to seeing what's going on, when, you know, it might be a good time to talk to them. Just, you know, they may not be open to speaking about it initially, but I think that those would be some good ways that we can try to implement those things, just starting off. I feel like Georgia's making a lot of great work and progress, just following up on your question. But I also feel like a lot of people under the gold dome, if you will, they just may not know how to support somebody like me, you know? And that's no judgment. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. But it's where I see a lot more opportunity because information goes a long way. So I'm hoping that I just was able to do that.
Yeah, those are great ideas, and I honestly don't know if some of that is being implemented now. Your daughter's 9, so it's possible that some of those programs have entered into the space of the Department of Public Health and maybe WIC, like you suggested. And I'm not sure about pediatricians, but wow, those are really good ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're up to it, I want to open it up for at least a few questions. Gabrielle, if we have enough time for just a few questions, or are we needing to shut down?
We have time for maybe 2 questions, but I want to make sure that those questions, I want to kind of monitor and screen those questions just so that we all look in the chat box if anyone has any. I know I have a couple of questions that I do want to ask you. Great job.